Awake living into uncharted territory together, accelerating your wellness path, plus your interconnectivity at the same time. It's not your grandma's or your Veda, but it kind of is. It's the Yoga Healer Real Life Show with Kate Stillman.
Have you seen Wonder Woman yet? Okay, it's Kate Stillman with the Yoga Healer Real Life Show, and I saw Wonder Woman with my kid and husband and my kid's friend at the drive-in, and the 9-year-olds were unbelievably blown away by the powerful experience of this modern-day movie that's really based on the goddess Diana, and this so fits into the show today with Kassandra, who's kind of a queen, a yogini queen of YouTube. Kassandra Reinhardt is a yin yogi who does a lot about women and moon cycle empowerment. And so that's what today's episode was all about. And all I have to say is Wonder Woman really embodies this first part of the cycle, like post-menses, that first part of the cycle where you're in the goddess warrior phase. And so if this is exciting to you, you're going to love today's show. Stay tuned and watch that movie. It's so good.
Calling all yoga teachers, Ayurvedic practitioners, and wellness experts, are you wondering how to get your clients better results faster? I bet you're also wondering why habit change science is such a major factor in wellness evolution, and how to change your business model to change your career and your life. I bet you're also wondering how to build consistent, reliable income, and why being part of a dynamic, supportive community is a key to your success. If you are indeed wondering all this, go to yogahealthcoaching.com/YHC-webinar for the Yoga Health Coaching webinar. Again, that's at yogahealthcoaching.com/YHC-webinar to learn exactly how to get your clients' results faster and evolve your career.
Kassandra Reinhardt is the world's leading yin yoga instructor on YouTube with over 4 million YouTube views and 60,000 subscribers. Her videos have served as the intro and the motivation for thousands of people around the world to experience the benefits of a regular yin practice. I know for me personally, like I don't do enough yin stuff in my life. I like to bike my bike up mountains and do a lot of CrossFit, and so the idea of like holding poses longer and softening and opening is more or less my best medicine and is for so many others. And that's why yin yoga is gaining in popularity. What Kassandra and I really overlap on here is the power of aligning your yoga practice to your menstrual rhythm. So many women don't know about this. And for those who are postmenopausal, we often don't know the power of aligning our cycle to the moon. And people in general are not so aligned to the moon, men and women alike. So we really get in this episode into the archetypes of the 4 main moon cycles that we experience each month and how this translates on the mat and in your daily life. So stay tuned for Kassandra Reinhardt. Hello, everyone. I'm here with Kassandra of Yoga with Kassandra. So fun to have a chance to connect with you. And for those who don't know Kassandra Reinhardt, she's really prevalent on YouTube with great yin yoga classes. And you've been doing this for a few years in terms of your YouTube posting, yeah?
Yes, thank you so much for having me on. I've been running my Yoga with Kassandra YouTube channel for 3 years now. I just reached my 3-year anniversary in early April, so a couple years now.
Awesome. Was it hard for you to put yourself out there at first, or was it natural for you?
Oh, it was terrifying. I had been wanting to do a YouTube channel for many years before I actually started it, but I had a lot of resistance towards it. I really was quite insecure about putting myself out there, even though I was really motivated and really wanted to do it, but I just had so much fear around being so public, and I just really worried what other people would think about me. So it took me at least a full year before I got the courage to click publish on my first video. And then even when I started putting my first videos online, I didn't even really tell anyone. So yeah. It was a learning curve. You know, it's hard to put yourself out there at first, but it's by far one of the best decisions I've ever made in my entire life. So I'm glad that I finally was able to do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I hear you. So can you tell people who don't know the difference between yin yoga and other kinds of yoga, what yin yoga is all about?
Absolutely. So yin yoga is a form of yoga that is mostly passive in nature. So it's the Taoist theory of yin and yang. Most of us lead a very yang, or some people pronounce it yang, type of life where we are constantly going. So forms of yoga like hatha, power, vinyasa tend to be more yang in nature because they are active, they are building strength, they are using power and force and all that kind of stuff, which is really terrific. But yin is the complementary practice to that. So we hold passive poses for an extended period of time. The average will maybe be about 3 to 5 minutes is what you'll see the most common in classes, but it can go anywhere up to 10 minutes really. And the poses are passive, which means that you're not using muscular effort. So this is definitely not the kind of yoga that's going to make you, lose weight or gain muscle or any kind of strength in that manner, but it is absolutely going to build mental strength because it is a pretty challenging practice. It's pretty difficult to be in pigeon pose for 5 minutes. You start to really come up with a lot of stuff and internal chatter. So it's a very meditative form of practice. It's absolutely wonderful for your joints because you are not engaging actively your muscles. The emphasis of the pose is able to target the connective tissues and target the joints. So it will absolutely help people gain flexibility. It's a wonderful way to reduce stress and reduce anxiety and to go a little bit deeper into your meditation practice. But if you're looking for something that's going to make you physically stronger and stronger muscles and muscle definition and that kind of stuff, yin yoga is not the practice for that.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about connective tissue. As far as I understand now, it's like at the leading edge of like biohacking and health science. Like we get that whatever's happening in our connective tissue is more or less shaping how we are and how we act and how we think. And as we start to open our connective tissue and get more circulation in there, like a lot of patterns are unwound. And that this is really the heart of yoga historically, right? It's like, to me, it's so fascinating how even like the advanced poses where arms press on certain, parts of legs and legs press on certain parts of arms, like it opens up so much in the connective tissue in a really high functional way. Do you want to just talk a little bit about your experience with what happens as you've reshaped your body?
Yeah, I mean, to me, I think the biggest breakthrough that's discovering and learning more about fascia and learning more about connective tissues is that I feel like if you look back 20, 30 years ago, our understanding of anatomy was very compartmentalized. So we would kind of try to separate the muscles. This muscle does this. It attaches here and it asserts here. And we had all these this very separate view of the body. And the more that we've started to study connective tissues and study fascia, the more we've been able to really realize that nothing is separate in our body. Everything is interconnected, interwoven together. And if I squeeze my hand, there is a physical chain reaction to the rest of my body. And it's not just isolated to the muscles in my hand that is doing the gripping. So yin yoga has really kind of pioneered this approach, even though it's an older practice. It really does have this emphasis that we are linking the entire body together, even though this pose might only be considered to be a hip opening posture. So for me in my practice, I've always been the kind of person who has had very, very open hips, but very extremely tight hamstrings. And I came from the world of dance, and you would have think that, doing ballet for 18 years would have helped me increase my hamstring flexibility, but it really didn't. And I think the reason I wasn't able to kind of change that physically in my body was because I had this separate compartmentalized idea of my body. So my hamstrings are tight. This means I need to stretch my hamstrings. And then when I started to dive a little bit deeper into the practice of yin yoga and looking at yoga from a more holistic approach and really started to study fascia, I realized that actually it's not necessarily just my hamstrings that need to be targeted if I want to open them up. So I had to really go higher up the posterior chain and start to open up around the spine, around the upper back, and even looking at the front of the legs, deep into the hip flexors and into the quads. So for me, the big shifts that happened in my body was when I started to let go of the idea that everything is separate and start to look at the entire body as a whole. And that's how I've been able to actually target those more specific areas in my body. So it sounds a little bit counterintuitive, but for me, that's the best way that I've been able to get the changes that I was looking for.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's interesting. A few things that you said, I'm like, because like to me, yoga's always been holistic and multifaceted. I think when we looked at how it was imported into the United States and like the timing of it with the, with the muscles and points of insertion and, but overall, if we look at the history of the practice, it's like we did intuitively know, I believe yogis did intuitively know this and experience this and where it's going. I mean, it's interesting too, where it's going now. I interviewed Donna Farhi about her new book that's actually releasing today. And she does this whole, it's so cool. It's so about using the psoas to link up your whole body, like getting so deep in your awareness. So when you say like, oh, from the hamstrings, I went up the posterior chain, it's like, yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah. And then, and it's getting people in touch with like, where are these super deep industrial strength columns that connect the spine to the legs, and how much are we able to be both in there and then simultaneously in our whole body, in our practice, right? And it's like, that's where we start to get both the centralized and the decentralized experience in our practice simultaneously, which to me like develops so many neural pathways that we're able to exercise our brains, right, at the same time while we're in our body.
And that's really where the practice or the Taoist perspective of yin and yang comes into play. So although I am a deep lover of yin yoga, it is not the only style that I practice or that I teach, because really, like you said, the intention really is to keep building those pathways and those connections. So you do need to keep experimenting. It's all about finding balance and about exploring the different ways that you can move your body. And sometimes the ways that you can move your body need to be held for a longer period of time. So those yin practices can be a really great, challenging new ways to move and to breathe and to feel out a yoga pose. But I definitely wouldn't only rely on yin yoga to give me that. I still very much appreciate the hatha yoga traditions and vinyasa and power. And to me, really where I see the most progress, not even just physically, but when I feel the most at peace with myself is when I find that balance and I play and I experiment with different forms of movement within yoga and also outside of yoga and different forms of movement that we can have.
Yeah. Well, and I think we're seeing it right now, especially in I was just reading Dave Asprey's, the Headstrong, his new release. And he talks so much about like all these different things that we know are working, or that he's figured out are working from, spending enormous amounts of money and time and research. And, and a lot of them are these, if we look at the core of it, it's like these pulsating opposites of going deep into stillness and then going deep into high intensity interval training. And, it's like using weights and then using pure vibration itself. If we look at like the yogic history of that, the yogis use pure vibration just through sound, right? Just through moving sound and the different chakras of the body, the different energy centers in the body. And it's cool to see this history that we have in yoga and how it's really merging with this modern world. And so many people right now have a fairly stagnant life, right? Like they're sitting a lot, they're commuting, they have a desk job, maybe they have a standing desk, but they're still not moving as much as we would have as wild monkeys, right? They're still not experiencing that. And so practices of going into high intensity movement and then going deeper and slower into a yoga practice. So we move, both sides of that spectrum outward in order to become more whole.
Yeah, exactly. Because if you look at the average person who maybe has just like a 9-to-5 job, so they're going to spend a lot of their times probably sitting at a desk. I know I lived that life for many years. So that activity of sitting and working at a desk is very yin in nature. However, if you look at what's happening on the mental front, we see that there's a lot of stress. There's a lot of activity going on in the mental space, but their body is physically very yin, but the mind is very yang in nature. It's going, going, going. We are multitasking. We are working. We are looking at our phones. We are stressing out about what we have to do for the rest of the day. So if you look at these average people who are physically leading a very yin life, but mentally overly yang, you need to be able to balance that out. So to me, that was to find a 50-50 in, okay, I do actually need to do a more active kind of practice like vinyasa, just to like move the stagnant energy that I've built up from 8 hours of sitting at a desk. But then I also need to complement it with either meditation or with a yin yoga practice so that I can actually give the yin balance to my yang mentality that has been overstressed, that has been, pumping hormones all day and making me feel really frazzled and really anxious, so that I can wind down at the end of the day and actually get my 8 hours of sleep, which we're seeing that people are getting less and less of because they simply cannot fall asleep anymore. Like the hormones are just always running. So it is really interesting. You do need both at all times, and the balance is going to look different from person to person. So I've really had to play around with it and tweak it. And what I needed last week is not what I'm going to need this week, but just cultivating the awareness of starting to look like, okay, what kind of day did I have physically and how did I feel throughout the day? That's usually what guides me towards what kind of practice am I going to do this evening. And, I am an evening practitioner. I know a lot of people like to practice early on in the morning, but that's just never been for me.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and part of it too is like, what kind of day do I want to have tomorrow? Right. It's like looking at what am I continually evolving and designing for? And to me, that's where yoga really comes alive, that where you have these pulsations, the spanda, the pulsations of the opposite, the yin, the yang, the active, the passive, the engaged, the reflective, right? Where we have these different aspects of just seeing like, okay, what do I need to design for tomorrow, right? Or what do I need to design for the rest of the day? And in there, we have so much more flexibility of adaptability. And instead of looking at like, oh, I'm a practitioner of this kind of yoga, instead it's just like, okay, everything's available, right? It's all good. There's a lot of different ways to go here. We need to, it's like, what's going to help you experience more harmony now and then later in the day and then tomorrow, and getting out of the box of, doing the same thing all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's a really empowering way to take a look at your yoga practice too, because you're not giving up your power to the teacher and saying, you tell me what I need. It's you yourself as a student. You're observing yourself, you're observing your lifestyle, and you're making your decisions according to that, knowing that your needs are going to change day to day, week to week, month to month, and then your practice is going to change that way. So I found it to be a really empowering thing for me to be able to start to intuitively feel, what do I need? How does my body need to move? Does it actually need to move, or does it need stillness and quiet and peace? And it can be kind of difficult at first to find that intuition and cultivate it within you if it's not a practice that you're used to doing, but it's like a muscle, you work it and you develop it over time, and then it becomes second nature. You know exactly what you need to do. And that's how you're able to make whatever practices that you do go out into the world and take. That's how you're able to kind of protect yourself in them and prevent injury, because you always have your intuition guiding you and telling you and saying, okay, just because the teacher is trying to guide me in this does not mean that this is necessarily what's going to be right for me. I mean, especially with yin yoga, sometimes the poses are like 10 minutes at a time on each side. And for, beginners or people who've never really done this kind of practice, that can be way too much. And if they don't have the intuition and the empowerment within themselves to really gauge what is and isn't appropriate, that's when you enter into a little bit of dangerous territory. So it always, to me, it's always about empowering the student to be able to feel intuitively within themselves, what is it that I need right now, without judgment, without expectation.
Yeah. Yeah, it's huge. Yeah, and there's such this balance between like getting the skills and then being able to take them home and to live them. I find, I'm so glad that I started early with intense training, or intensive training,
in yoga and meditation and pranayama, in a number of different sports, and just like how over time, like decade after decade, as wisdom builds, the repertoire expands, and it's like you're constantly in lifestyle and body design. And there's for people that haven't put that time in it, I just want to say, like, hey, like, no one can do that for you. You've got to learn. You've got to go to some classes before you can develop this kind of deeper intuition. Like, you've got to build your skill set to be able to tap into the inner body. It doesn't just happen. And there's a reason that the wisdom traditions, yoga being one of them, they're oral living traditions. They passed teacher to student, student to teacher. They keep moving, down chain, and there's a learning curve to it that needs to be respected. So there's like an educated intuition and there's an uneducated intuition. I find this all the time with people think they know what's good for them, but it's just coming from past patterning. It's not coming from really what's on the edge for them, because they haven't done the work yet to be able to intuit at that level.
Right. No, I agree. And I think it's a little bit hard just with where we are at with technology right now. Like, we are being just inundated with information, right? Left and right. There's someone is trying to sell us something, or someone is trying to educate us on something. And that's neither good nor bad, in my opinion, but it really does, like, your discernment muscle needs to be really apt and really well developed, because otherwise it's completely overwhelming. And, like you said before, it wasn't orally transmitted teachings. Nowadays, we still have some of that, but we also have so many other ways that we are consuming information and learning. And me being an online yoga teacher is certainly a part of that. It's a whole new world when it comes to teaching yoga and learning about yoga, both the philosophy, the asana, the meditation, whatever it is that you're trying to learn. There's just so much. So the most common, I get students all the time from me who are just saying, like, I don't know where to start. Like, that is a comment. I don't know if you've gotten that before, but for me, time and time again, students come and they're like, I want to learn more, but I don't know where to start. I don't know which teacher to go train with, because there are so many teachers out there. And it is challenging to navigate, even myself. I mean, I'm an eternal student. When it came time a year ago, I just kind of came to this place where I thought, you know what, I need a new teacher. I need to find a teacher that really resonates with me. It was such an overwhelming process to really try to find someone that was a right fit, because we have so many teachers these days, which is a beautiful thing, but the information is just coming from all over the place. And to really be able to discern who is going to be a right fit, where is my next great teacher? It's hard. It's daunting. And I'm glad I took the time to find someone who resonated with me, but it almost made me want to give up, just because there was so much information coming at me online and in person, and never ending. So it's a totally different world that we're in today.
In the second half of the show, we'll get into the second half of your cycle. More coming with Kassandra Reinhardt and the menstrual cycle.
All right. Hi, everybody. I'm Grace, and this is Tracy. We are in Enrollment, and we just wanted to talk to you today about why you should book a call with us. So there's a have a conversation call, it's called.
You definitely want to have a conversation with us. Even if you don't know what you want to talk about, you definitely want to talk to us.
Yeah, well, and you don't have to, you're not applying for a course. There's no, commitment here. We're very non-committal with this conversation. But then you'll want to make a commitment with us. Probably.
Because everybody does, let's be honest. Yeah.
Totally.
You want to be our friend. You want to be in a course with us for sure. If not, if you just want to think about it, then just have a conversation with us. That's
exactly.
Okay too.
That's okay too. We're really gentle on the first date, I think is what you're saying. Is what I'm hearing you say.
Okay, that was
Grace and Tracy's attempt at creating a have a conversation announcement for the podcast. What I would like to say is just go to yogahealer.com/have-a-conversation and you can find out more. They are cool cats to talk to. I'll give them that. That's why they're on the team. They're amazing. Love you too. If you want to talk to somebody about your dreams and your goals, go to have a conversation at yogahealer.com. Yeah. It's so different than even like 15 years ago with how many. Yeah. And there is something to really doing some homework, like there's the resonance piece and then there's the trusting piece and the, doing your homework and making sure that that what you're looking for, whether it's like the level of depth or charisma or whatnot, that you're getting that, or whether you really just need some knowledge, and just some how-to instructional, because there's a lot of that. But not just necessarily going word of mouth. Doing some research. So let's talk a little bit about the lunar cycles, because it was cool to see that you're doing a lot with lunar cycles. I taught my first. I've created a lot of curriculum over time at yogahealer.com, and one of my first classes I started teaching. And I think it was right along, actually, I think it was right in 2001 in San Francisco when I was teaching daily routines of a yogi was one of them. And optimal weight, optimal energy was another little 2-hour class I created. And then women and moon cycles came really shortly after that. And then I started teaching it locally in 2002. And it became like this reoccurring class that I would teach that was based on the cycles of the moon, that was just based on the goddess energies that are prevalent in the different cycles, that was based on the Ayurvedic system of doshas and where that unfolded and overlaid with the goddess cycles and the different ways of just relating to the parts of the cycle in physiology, and then with the plants that are most suited to women during different parts of the cycle. And I remember when I was first teaching it, it brought up so much with women not being just connected to their cycle, with so many women being medicated for their menstrual cycle, whether that's with a Nova ring or whether on birth control or whatnot, that just don't have connection to their own internal rhythms, that weren't, that just don't have any awareness of like fertility awareness method or just of their natural rhythmic body. And so many of the blocks. And then as those blocks get unblocked, all of a sudden women starting to get like, oh my gosh, I can receive Shakti, I can receive feminine flow directly from the moon, and starting to tap into that massive power in the sky. So let's talk a little bit about your journey with it, because I'm sure that there's some parallels.
Yeah, absolutely. I loved everything that you were saying. And I think it's really great how we keep talking about the cycle, but in today's day and age, there really are two separate cycles. Women's fertility and monthly cycles are no longer, for the most part, aligned with the lunar cycle. So it's like, before, if we really go back in time, it was purely just one cycle, because women's cycles were completely, or, usually most of the time, in line with the lunar cycle. But now today, people are on two different ones. So we have this lunar cycle that's going on, and then we have our own cycle of menstruation and ovulation. And somewhere along the way, they got out of sync with each other. So a big part of my journey was reclaiming the unification of those two cycles, because I didn't even know that was a thing. This isn't something that I learned about growing up at all. But over the last couple of years, I had been researching and learning a little bit more about it. And I went on my own journey of, getting off birth control, which I had been on for such a long time. And really, although, I can't say that it completely negatively affected me. I've, heard horror stories about birth control and, hormonal contraceptives of any kind. And I can't say that I had any of those negative side effects. But at the same time, I did experience that complete disconnection to my own inner power, my own intuition, and my femininity at the end of the day. That was completely cut off. So I kind of went on this quest where I just wanted to see what would it be like if I got off these pills, this birth control, and a bunch of other kind of that stuff. And I started really to like reading Moon Time by Lucy Pierce and a couple of other books on the topics of lunaception. And then I started really simply just doing some new moon yoga classes and some full moon yoga classes. And over the years, I really just fell in love with that process. And all of a sudden my monthly cycle was fully in line with the lunar cycle. And I felt these really deep, profound shifts within myself. And I kept wanting to communicate that with other women or link in with other women to share my experience and learn about their experiences. And the only thing that I could find was like in-person, like goddess circles, new moon classes and things like that. But I was really keen on joining an online one and I couldn't find one, like it didn't exist. So after a lot of wrestling within myself, I decided, well, if it doesn't exist, I guess I have to create it and birth it into the world. So that's how, Lunar Yoga was born for me. So at the moment, Lunar Yoga is an online community of women, and it's wonderful because we have people joining from all over the world of all age groups and everyone represented coming together, and everyone just on this quest of reclaiming their femininity and getting in touch once more with their intuition and truly connecting to the female archetypes of, the maiden, the mother, the wild woman, and the crone, and really embodying that and seeing how all 4 archetypes are represented each and every single month as we go through our monthly cycle and through the lunar cycle. And it's funny because with every month that passes, we always get a couple more women who are like, yes, I'm finally aligned, from being so disconnected. All of a sudden, the shifts are actually starting to happen. So it's been a really, I said that starting my YouTube channel is probably the best decision that I've ever made. I think starting the Lunar Yoga online community, that's probably the second best decision I've ever made.
So let's talk about these different phases of the cycle, because that's where I find that most, like there's the easiest access, right? So just for women now, just starting with your own cycle and just taking a moment to presence where are you at? Are you, and if you're post menopausal, just go to what's the moon doing right now.
Yeah.
And look at are you pre-ovulation? Are you post-ovulation? Are you bleeding? Or are you post-bleeding? Just like getting a sense of where you are, where that is. And then walking through like, okay, if we just start with the beginning, so the maiden cycle. And I actually, one of the goddesses in Greek mythology that comes up with this is Athena, she's a warrior goddess. And I like that more than the term maiden personally in me, because I have a lot of warrior energy. Naturally, but like there's a sense of she was a goddess who she was not interested in men. Like the gods were all like, oh, Athena, she's so beautiful, and she's just like, I'm doing my thing, like I'm shooting my arrow. Mm-hmm. And there's that real sense of independent spirit, right? Of being of a newness. And in Ayurveda, it's the strongest time of the cycle. And I like to remind people of this because there's a way we can use that strength for new projects, but also like for women that have something intense they need to do. Maybe they have to go through surgery. Like that's the strongest time of the month. Like you do not want to have surgery when you're menstruating. You don't want to have surgery the week before you're going to menstruate. Right. You want to use that new, fresh blood energy in your body that happens the week after. But yeah, do you want to talk a little bit about what happens next with the urge to merge?
Absolutely. So it's like if you have your first quarter moon energy, you're in the maiden archetype, your energy levels are starting to go up. This is the best time to, really feel the motivations to tackle new projects, get started on things. You are optimistic on a high, basically, because you just finished your period, basically. So it's the pre-ovulation stage. So after that pre-ovulation stage comes ovulation, which if you are in line with the lunar cycle, you would be ovulating around the time of the full moon. And the full moon is the time to harvest. This is the time to look over all the hard work that you've done and to really reap the rewards of it, to celebrate the achievements, to celebrate your fertility, your divine feminine essence, your sensuality, your sexuality, your flow with nature. This is for many women, once we really start to track our monthly cycles and track the lunar cycles, this is usually when women report feeling the best about themselves. They feel the best in their body, their levels of energy are doing really well. They feel they look really good, like everything has kind of like a little shimmer and sheen to it. And this is just when it's the time to go out and socialize. This is your mother archetype. So if I like to work with the archetypes, so it's maiden and mother. So the mother is for the full moon, and that she is fertile, she is loving, she is a celebratory force that really just harvests all from all of the hard work that we've done previously throughout the month. Physical work, emotional work, mental work. She is there to nurture all of it and to really, truly celebrate it. So that's the time where most women would be ovulating if they were in cycle with the moon cycle.
Yeah, and I think it's important to get that this part of the cycle is all about connecting. This urge to connect, this urge to merge is an old way of saying it. That isn't always there, right? And so when it is there, we can really be fully in it. Just knowing that we don't have to be in it when we're in Wild Woman or when we're in Hestia energy, or we don't have to be in it when we're in Crone energy, or that that really deep internal. It's the absolute opposite. And I think where so many women can access more power is really right there. Like, oh, that's only a week. That's not 24/7, 365. That's only a week of the month. It's not always there. And then we can really get into it and get into that service. Because there is very much a serving energy with connectivity. It's a very out there, extroverted time. Whereas the opposite side of when we're going towards menstruation and into menstruation, like it's a very introverted, very internal, very, listening to the depths of where intuition arises from part of the cycle. And if we get like, okay, as far as I go out, that's as deep as I get to go in. And that's what creates balance. Like that's the pulsation, full moon, new moon, right? And just getting those like, wow, it's wildly opposite. That's where we start to access the next level of our power.
Yeah, I love that. As far as we go out, we go in, because you're right. There is a lot of a connective and a connection energy with the full moon. And this can be, connecting with your loving partner, or it can be connecting with your girlfriends, like whatever it may be to you, that sense of community and connection is going to be reaching its peak. So now is the time to go out and socialize. And just like you said, the further out you go, the further in you're going to have to go after. And I feel like this is where our society loses balance. And I mean, we'll get to the new moon, but before we get to that new moon, after the full moon phase, we enter the third quarter moon. So that's the time to release. This to me, once I really started to understand and reclaim this third moon energy, this wild woman energy, I feel like this is when the biggest shift started to happen to me. So after ovulation, you enter your premenstrual phases, the PMS phase, where this is where things are being shaken up. I found that everyone is experiencing that time of the month quite differently, but one theme that really is pervasive is the theme of kind of releasing. Like this is when you are really evaluating what you have in your life and figuring out what do you want to keep and what do you need to let go of, what no longer serves you, what boundaries have been crossed, who do you have a bone to pick with, kind of thing. And this is when you are starting to turn in. So you've been moving out with the maiden and the mother energy. You've been, pouring yourself outwards and taking action. And now the wild, wise woman within you is asking for you to start to listen to yourself. Stop looking at others for validation. Stop looking to the external world to give you guidance. Start to learn to tune in and really shed those layers around you that no longer serves you, so that you can clear and cleanse your vessel and get really focused on what your deep inner intuition really needs and really wants at this time.
Yeah, and I just want to add to that, like there's if we look at a cycle, a full 4-week cycle, and we look at the 4-phase moon cycle, and we see that there's the beginning energy, there's the maturation energy, and then it's like that whole time between ovulation and menstruation. There's like the refinement to fruition. If menses is in like the I mean, there's so much going on there, but there's like the deep release and the receding. That there's this time, there's the highest degree of sensitivity. I mean, in Ayurveda, what happens with PMS is usually it's a pitta time of the cycle, and there's so, like, one of the things about pitta is it is that viveka, it is that ability to separate what works from what doesn't work. So if we do things that are aggravating to ourselves, it's a time where we're like the highest sensitivity, like we're the most able to discern. You mentioned discernment before, right? And so it's like, if we're not living into the deepest truths that we know, we will be hurting. Like, we will hurt ourselves, whether that's emotional fragility, whether that's weight gain, breast tenderness, poor digestion, whatever people are feeling in that part of the cycle that feels out of balance. It's the question there is like, what do you know that you're not actually doing?
Yeah, it's tough love, honestly. Like, I find it's the tough love feminine energy coming through within us. We've just had like the mother's embrace that was really positive and loving and sensual and charismatic and energetic and all that kind of stuff. But now it's like the other side of the mother, the wild woman, that's a little bit tougher, cut the crap. And it is the heightened sensitivity that we have. So we are, like, for me, what I found is that, like, before, when I was really out of touch with my cycle and totally resistant to all of this, my PMS symptoms were off the charts. It was really difficult. It was a very, very challenging time of the month for me. And the more I was able to give voice to that inner wild woman that just needed to set clear boundaries, that just needed to chill out a little bit and let go of my social circles for a couple of days and just be by myself, learning to journal, learning to do art therapy, anything to really channel that heightened sensitivity and channel that heightened intuition. All of a sudden, I found that my PMS symptoms were no longer the pain that they once were. Instead, it became a source of power and almost a period that I look forward to each and every single month, because each and every single month, it brings you a different kind of gift that I didn't have before.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's talk about menstruation. I mean, I wouldn't even say almost a gift, but we start to be able to receive the gift. We start to be able to get like, oh, I'm starting to go inward. Sweet. I wonder what this is going to be about. I know for me, I can really mark what creative, it's really interesting to me, like what deeply intuitive, creative things were born through my menstrual cycles of really like just taking that time to chill out when menstruating and taking the time to actually access the depths of intuition. And I don't bleed for very long. It's just usually like 48 hours, but oh my gosh, like the access to the depths of intuition. It's like when you know how to harvest the menstrual cycle, how to use it for every part of the cycle for full empowerment. All of a sudden, the absolutely like what will come through you, you will be like, whoa, I can't believe this. They called this like being on the rag. Like, this is so not being on the rag. Like, this is amazing. And that's what we can pass on. It's like, that's what we can pass on to our sisters. That's what we can pass on to our daughters. And there's so much deep healing work just there. Like, what is it going to take for you to get more in touch with your flow? And so many women don't allow themselves to flow. And so much of what we're talking about and reconnecting with the menstrual cycle is like, okay, you're talking about liquid fluidity throughout the entire 4 different parts of the cycle. Or in Ayurveda, we even categorize it into 3 parts of the cycle. It's a little different when we use the dosha clock on it. But there's and it's all unfolding, and it all makes a lot of sense. But actually, I want to return to a second too to what you're calling the mother energy, because it can also be the lover energy, which is a very different energy than the mother, which is this really much more like sexually out there, like really into the world of the sensual and into the world of the other.
right? And then there's the opposite, right? When we go into menses, it's really into it's into the same sex world instead of the other sex world. It's like it's in so deep into the self and into the absolute. So whether, whatever the absolute is to you, however you name that, but that which is beyond all of us and is the place where it's beyond characteristic, and the complete dissolution of awareness into that. And that's where intuition arises from. So we were talking about before earlier in the conversation, how like a lot of people aren't even in tune with their intuition to be able to make this. It's like, unless we can dissolve ourselves, we can't listen to intuition, unless we can allow the time for menses to be that time of deep listening, of not knowing, of unbecoming, right? Then we won't have access to the depths of intuition that forms the entire next cycle.
Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, it's hard. It's hard in today's world. Most people don't get to go away for 5 days and do a red tent, and to just be in isolation when they are menstruating. But really, to me, the most transformative, you were saying before, like as far as you go out, you also need to be able to go back in. So the reason I think why so many of us end up getting out of balance with our cycles is that we spend pretty much all of our lives being constantly out there. We don't have a work schedule that necessarily reflects our lunar schedule, our moon schedule, our own cycle. Like right now, I'm very blessed that I, work from home. So for 3 days when I'm menstruating, I have my out of office on. Like I make it a conscious point that, for those 3 days, this is the time where I know I need way more sleep. I need the lights dimmer. I need to not be moving as much or doing as much. I need to not be busy. I need to be able to be with myself in order for me to be my charismatic, outgoing, extrovert self towards the time of the full moon. But I'm not going to be able to find that balance unless I really learn to tone it down during the new moon while I am menstruating, really learning to appreciate this crone archetype that, sheds the outer layers that no longer serves and tunes in. It's like the returning to the womb in a way, like really focusing in on yourself, the return to the self, like you were mentioning. And to me, this is the most potent time of the month to set an intention. It's only with this, it's almost like sensory deprivation. If you've ever done any kind of sensory deprivation in a meditation or flotation therapy, you really truly need this kind of sensory deprivation, like a big blanket wrapped around you, in order to really be able to call in, what is the next best step for me? What is the new intention that I want to set? What do I want the rest of the month ahead, or the rest, the few couple of months ahead to look like? You won't be able to achieve that sense of clarity unless you're able to actually cut out all external noise and focus in on yourself. It is the dark moon. It is meant to be a dark time inward, quiet, solitude, that deep stillness, so that you can learn to actually listen. And then you'll find that the first quarter moon and the full moon take on their appropriate energies, because you've allowed the new moon and the crone to really be itself, instead of trying to change it or make it something, that it's not meant to be. But for most women, we work 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. So it's not always possible to make that quiet time and make that time of stillness and aloneness while you are bleeding. But I always encourage people to, instead of having lunch with all your coworkers on that day, like go have lunch outside by yourself, make sure that all the lighting in your house is a little bit dimmer, use candles instead, take an hour to journal at the end of the night, draw a bath, make it a sacred time of ritual, even if you do have to keep up with the busyness of your day-to-day life. I get it. People have jobs, they have families. We can't always control what we want to, but we do have ways that we can make this more of a sacred time to make it a little bit more meaningful, so that we're not always going. It's that yin and yang. This is the yin time of the month, where we really need to tune in and be meditative and quiet and a little bit still.
Yeah, exactly. And you get better at it. You guys, you get better at it. It's so for anyone who's really not, who's like, oh, wow, that sounds like a dream to be able to just be on my own rhythm. It's like, yeah, that's what you actually can design for. And just doing a little bit now just even saying like, okay, yeah, no, I'm not going to go out those nights, or no, I'm not going to have as many meetings on those days. Like just keeping asking yourself, like, what's the littlest thing I can do to make it a little bit easier for me? And to really receive, like, to me, it's less about setting an intention. It's more about receiving. Like, it's about just receiving divine instruction. It's like receiving divine, an imperative is really what, to me, it feels like after years and years of working with, is just getting quiet enough to be able to hear. And then it's like, oh, okay, that's where the natural energy is. Like, that's where nature is moving through my physiology, using all parts, using my cognitive capacities, using my, using everything I've got, right? And like, that's the next phase. And you get a glimpse, and you don't know how it's going to turn out, or you get a hit, and it's empowered by the power that's behind the moon, right? It's powered behind the divine feminine creative energy. And that to me is so, so sacred. Well, Kassandra, it's been really fun to go into this with you. I really appreciate the conversation.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. This was great.
All right, so the take-homes from today's show are: 1, watch Wonder Woman, and so you can start to tap into these ancient Greek goddesses, or watching any kind of these more older style god and goddess films, whether they're Vedic or Greek or Roman, you start to tap into these archetypes, and then you start to see like those archetypes line up with your biorhythms, and that there's different powers at different phases, and that is so empowering on so many levels for our archetypal brains that have had these myths over time. So watch Wonder Woman, tune into your cycle. I hope you enjoyed today's show. And next week I talk with Michael Cohen of, this is kind of cool, your 6 human needs and your modern life skills. We really get into what are the 6 human needs of significance, contribution, growth, love, certainty, uncertainty. And I unpack how I'm pretty a big fan of uncertainty, but how that can shoot me in the foot. I think you'll love this show because it's really cool about understanding your own psychological needs and how they may be really different than the needs of your kid, your partner, your business partner, your coworkers, etc. All right. Namaste and have a great day.
Yoga Healer Real Life Show with Kate Stillman. Yoga Healer.